3 years after the excellent Command & Conquer 3 Tiberium Wars, which gave fans the awesome fast-paced CNC classic gameplay we all know and love, Electronic Arts decided to shake things up with one of the boldest moves in RTS history and burnt everything to the ground. How could a multi-billion-dollar video game corporation create one of the worst RTS games? No, one of the worst strategy games, period, that languishes at the bottom of Steam's user reviews on the platform? Why was Command & Conquer 4 the disaster that it was? Command & Conquer 3 and its expansion Kane's Wrath was very well received, but during this time there was a rise of a new kind of real-time strategy game, one that began as a mod, the rise of the massively online battle arena such as Dota, League of Legends, and then later Dota 2. Electronic Arts wanted in on this trend, which was becoming a very big subgenre of the RTS. Command & Conquer 4 began its life in development not even as a full-on mainline CNC game. It was rumored to be Command & Conquer 3 Online, meant for the Asian market, a completely competitive multiplayer experience. You wouldn't know this though if you listened to what the devs and its producers said about the game in the run-up to its release. In interviews, they mentioned they needed to give the series a rethink and do something new and fresh for the genre, a bold reinvention of Command & Conquer. This would be genius, as it would still, and I use the word still in air quotes here, have the fast-paced action of Command & Conquer, but focus on being more tactical with a smaller unit count and a mobile base. A mobile base, yes, what an incredibly innovative idea. They also added that RTS games have gotten a bit too hardcore for fans, apparently, and many have drifted away from RTS games to what I would assume EA would think were MOBAs. MOBAs were stealing the thunder of RTSs. With Command & Conquer 4 Tiberian Twilight, they aim to make fans happy and attract a whole bunch of new players who might have been put off by things like build orders. They said Command & Conquer 4 would still maintain the tactical and strategic depth. Oh, how I wish. In reality, Command & Conquer 4, this abomination of an RTS, is a shell of its former self, a stripped down bare-bones game that has very little semblance to an RTS that no one asked for. EA didn't get any feedback from fans that said they felt the Command & Conquer series was too complex or too intimidating to them. Nobody said this. Although there were certainly reviews that mentioned the series was getting a bit too stale, a bit too predictable, formulaic. This is especially for reviews of the expansion Kane's Wrath, and back then video game reviews, I suppose, mattered more to game companies. But no one admitted this started off as a different game in the beginning. It was just shoved into becoming Command & Conquer 4, the conclusion of the Tiberium Saga storyline, and what a way to go out. Firstly, I think the most egregious mistake they made was stripping away the economy. I'm not even talking about the fact that there's no base building, there is no harvesting Tiberium in this game, like at all. The developers would say, oh, but there are Tiberium pickups in the game. But that's not an RTS mechanic. This is indeed more like a MOBA where you pick up power-ups and such. An RTS lives and dies on its economy, which is why hurting the enemy's economy is an important aspect of almost every RTS game in existence. But no, that would be too complex for a whole new audience apparently. Or maybe that was all entirely just an excuse to force this online multiplayer game into something that it was never supposed to be. Anyway, in place of base building, they introduced a mobile base, the crawler, which is part of their new innovation, a class system in Command and Conquer. So depending on the crawler you picked, offensive, defensive or support, you get access to different specialized units and abilities, which makes most sense in an online co-op setting though. So having classes in even competitive matches or single player skirmish and campaign makes no real sense. It is yet a way to close off strategic options into different crawlers instead of giving you all your options like in other RTS games and giving you the strategic choice. They'd rather pare things back and limit you to a specific playstyle. I mean, brilliant move, EA. Not that this couldn't work, mind you, Company of Heroes had doctrines, but they never limited your abilities but opened up new ones. Speaking of limiting your options, yeah, the game also came with a mind-numbing XP system. You had to gain experience points even in single player to unlock new units. That means playing against someone who has already unlocked a bunch more units was not in your favor. New players were always going to have an uphill battle defeating opponents with more XP. This is not the same as unlocking some weapon in Battlefield or Call of Duty. This is an RTS and it kind of ruins the multiplayer experience. Not that COD or Battlefield is balanced, mind you, but you get my point. In an RTS, you would expect to be beaten by a technically skilled opponent, not one with more powerful units because they played more of the game. So yeah, playing single player to farm XP was something you probably had to do, or maybe that was all part of that free to play model, that encouraged people to grind the game. So yeah, playing single player to farm XP was something you probably had to do. And to be completely honest, it was the only good reason you'd want to play the single player campaign, because it was atrocious. A lot of missions seemed like an afterthought. The mission design sucked. I mean, who thought of an escort mission as being the first proper mission was a great way to start the campaign with. Escort missions suck, and Command & Conquer 4's escort mission was way suckier. Look, you lost a transport here in a cutscene, and the difficulty spike is ridiculous. For what is the first mission? I mean, please, developers, for the love of all things good, before you add that escort mission into your RTS campaign, do not, I repeat, do not do it. Find some other mission type that breaks this RTS cliche. It was generally pretty easy to cheese the campaign, although I do admit I don't think the missions are easy at all, but they are easy to cheese. I found using the support crawlers that lets you just fly around was one of the best ways of completing the objectives most of the time, since you weren't slowed down by the terrain which funnels you down a path. Not really all that balanced. It was a bit more of a chore to play through. And what was the motivation really for completing missions beyond the XP earned? An eye-wateringly bad story. I mean, what the hell happened to the writing and the acting? They've put a wife in this game and that we are supposed to care about? The emotional cliffhanger that is such a one-dimensional character, you just couldn't avoid rolling your eyes when she's on screen.
I know that you're anxious to go back. It's just that I still feel it's too soon. It's just that...
Look, I won't deny that bad acting and a campy story is par for the course in Command & Conquer, but CNC 4th takes it to a whole new level. And what happened to the well-known actors? Like in previous games we got Michael Ironside, James Earl Jones, great actors, and even if the story wasn't the best, it was just fun to watch the story unfold. Even the actors knew it was just this silly fun thing. Now it does sort of make sense if Command & Conquer 4 was a shift from an online game and they needed to suddenly get actors to play this role, so the better actors probably weren't free on such short notice. This is a possibility, and unfortunately, it didn't help the game. The conclusion to Kane's story was such a cliche ending, you kinda saw it from a mile away. It didn't really make the hassle of trudging through the campaign worth it. They made a different game that was not an RTS, added horrendous mechanics that no one had fun with, packaged it with one of the worst stories they had ever written, and to top it all off, the game couldn't be played offline. This is why the game failed. Now, it didn't do terribly in the first week of sale. In fact, it was the top seller when it was released. But the reviews hit, the opinions flooded the internet, fans were aghast and let everyone else know about the travesty that was Command & Conquer 4, Tiberian Twilight. The sales faded away. I distinctly remember the shelves at my local video game store were filled with unsold copies of this game. They thought this was going to be a huge hit, so they overstocked it, but it became a bargain bin game. Command & Conquer 4 is a story about greed, trying to chase after trends, and assumptions that are simply plain wrong. People didn't flock to MOBAs because RTSs were too complex. The success of MOBAs weren't due to some inherent failure of the RTS genre, although we could debate that RTSs could have improved a lot, but that's for another discussion for another day. And trying to turn an online-only multiplayer game into a different game is always going to be a recipe for disaster. The real tragedy though is EA trying to pass it off as some amazing and much needed evolution of the RTS genre. It was a crappy idea from the very beginning, and it sealed the fate of the Command & Conquer games, the Tiberium saga. EA pretty much stopped making RTS games after Command & Conquer 4. Whatever they did after that, other than the prematurely murdered Command & Conquer Generals 2 free-to-play thingy they worked on, everything else was a quick cash grab to squeeze revenue from Eastern markets with Chinese-made mobile games. Will we ever get a new RTS game from EA? Will we ever get another Command & Conquer game? Maybe a new one that's maybe about the son of Kane, since Kane is gone, if the canon storyline is the not ending. Maybe EA no longer has developers who could make a good RTS game. Or maybe they could get Petroglyph. They did the CNC remaster after all and were founded by Westwood devs. The RTS has had a bit of a resurgence lately, with some decent successes. But I don't want to put too much hope on this. Anyway, do tell me in the comments, have you played Command & Conquer 4 and what did you think of it? Do you think EA could make a new Tiberium Saga RTS? Share your speculations and guesses below. I'd like to know your thoughts. Now, if you thought Command & Conquer 4 was a disaster, here's a video about a modern day RTS disaster that's still somewhat unraveling, maybe. Coincidentally, the Stormgate studio lead, Tim Morton, was also a senior development lead on the Command & Conquer Generals 2 project. Watch this video on Stormgate over here. Thanks for watching and farewell, noble friends.